One of the great exciting parts about an oratorio that also always presents challenges, but it's the kind of challenge I think I love the most, is this is a dramatic story. So if you think about even, let's say, a Bach cantata, when you finish a movement, there's a pause, and then we go to the next movement. And then when you finish a movement, there's a pause, and you go to the next movement. There are sometimes in Elijah 7 or 8 movements. There is no pause. It goes straight into the next one. So that's one of the best parts about an oratorio is it just keeps moving, moving, moving. There are pauses. There are times to catch your breath. There will be an intermission. So as a conductor, one of the things I'm most passionate about and that I'm working on discovering is how can I keep the drama going and how can I let there be as little room as possible between the movements so it feels seamless for an audience member. Luckily for the performers, as far as the singers, it does go back and forth quite a bit. There are 4 soloists. Elijah is a baritone. But we have a soprano, alto, and tenor soloist as well. And so, they kind of take turns with their arias and their recits. And then, of course, the chorus is involved quite a bit, acting both as the prophets of Baal, acting as the people of the land, acting as a chorus of angels. They take on many different roles throughout. Normally, in the typical versions of Elijah, you might have 8 first violins and 7 second violins. We're going to have 1 first violin and 1 second violin because this is a reduced chamber orchestration done by Johann Linkelmann. So a reduced orchestration simply means a lesser number of instruments. And in doing so, it thins out the texture, but you're not missing anything. It's still Elijah. It's still all the words, all the music, all the movements. So the vocal score for Elijah, let's say all the chorus parts, we're using the exact same one you would use in the full orchestration. Now, Henry Fleury and I did decide to take out a handful of movements as the real story of Elijah can sometimes take almost 2.5 hours. The length of it, I tend to say, is something that maybe children don't always want to come to. Usually when we do a young people's program, we tend to do 9 or 10 pieces that are 3 to 5 minutes long in that sense. This is a story that we tell in depth of Elijah. And so the length of it might turn some children off, but it's also very exciting. And because it's in English and because there are so many characters, but also because in churches and in synagogues, they tell the story of Elijah, to young children. And I grew up in a church where I learned about Elijah, and I always, in retrospect, say, why didn't we get to listen to the oratorio? Because for me, I'd kind of rather learn the story of this biblical character or this character from this faith tradition through a live telling of it. It's not quite a movie, but it is way more alive and real than just reading the story from pages of a book. Like any piece of art, it had its critics as well, but overall, the majority of the people who went and saw it were just absolutely stunned because it really does tell a story in a epic way. I mean, the entire piece ends with one of Mendelssohn's most famous fugues, which is this contrapuntal interaction between the voices and the orchestra. And every time I go to practice it and study it, I just get excited. I get thrilled because it's one of those movements that you can't help but be energized by. And so Mendelssohn knew how to write a really great work. He also knows how to end a really great work. And because of that, that's what gets you the good reviews, right? Because people leave feeling that way. And I think our audience will feel that way as well. A triumph over something. We all struggle. We all have persecution. We all have hardship. How do you push through that and triumph? That's the story of Elijah, is how he overcomes that adversity, how he overcomes being the one on the outside, and instead is a chosen one, honored by God and taken up in a chariot of fire. And while we won't actually take Kaylin up in a chariot of fire, I do think you'll feel that sense as we end the work on April 2nd.